Josh had always believed that a man's home was his sanctuary, a place of peace, stability, and control in a world that often felt like it was spiraling out of order. But that illusion shattered the morning he stepped outside and found his hedge, his perfectly trimmed, painstakingly nurtured hedge, completely flattened. The branches, once vibrant and strong, were reduced to a tangled mess of crushed leaves and broken twigs. The soil, where he had spent hours digging, planting, and tending, had deep tire marks, as if someone had deliberately plowed right through it without a second thought. Josh clenched his fists, his breath slow and steady, but his heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't an accident. This was personal. Love seeing entitled people get what they deserve. Subscribe for more crazy stories like this. At first, he thought maybe it was some reckless driver, maybe a delivery truck that had miscalculated a turn. But deep down, he already knew the truth. It wasn't random. This was the fourth time in 2 weeks. He squatted down, running his fingers along the tire tracks, noting the pattern, the weight distribution. Heavy vehicle, SUV, maybe even a truck. The kind of vehicle that didn't just clip a hedge. No! Whoever did this had gone out of their way to make sure it was utterly destroyed. And then he spotted it. A small, shattered fragment of plastic nestled between the broken branches. A piece of a headlight casing. They messed up. Josh stood, his jaw tightening. He knew exactly who was behind this. Karen Douglas, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, a woman who had made it her personal mission to dictate how the entire neighborhood should look, down to the shade of mulch in people's yards. She had already tried to get Josh to remove his hedge before, claiming it was too tall and didn't align with the community's aesthetics. But that hedge wasn't just decoration. It was a boundary, a line between his property and their rules. And now, she wasn't asking anymore. Josh wiped his hands on his jeans and exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. He had lived in this house for 15 years. He wasn't about to be bullied into submission by an HOA dictator with too much time on her hands. The real question was, what was her endgame? He walked back up to his porch, his mind racing. The HOA had been pushing for neighborhood improvements, a fancy term for forcing homeowners to comply with new policies that always seemed to favor a select few. He had ignored most of it, refusing to bend to their increasingly ridiculous demands. And now this, a direct attack on his property. Josh spent the next few days trying to catch her in the act. He adjusted his routine, waking up earlier, staying up later, watching from his porch with quiet determination. But Karen was careful. Every time it happened, she managed to do it when he wasn't looking, when he ran to the store, when he was under the car in his garage, even when he took his trash out for just 5 minutes. It was almost surgical, calculated. The other neighbors were no help. They either didn't want to get involved or were too afraid of HOA retaliation. Even old Mrs. Henderson across the street, who spent most of her time on her front porch, just shook her head. "They come at night," she said, lowering her voice as if someone might be listening. "Quick, like they don't want to be seen." Josh's patience was wearing thin. He wasn't a man who sought conflict, but he also wasn't a man who backed down when he was being pushed. And then one night it finally happened. He had stepped inside for 2 minutes to grab a wrench from his workbench. Just 2 damn minutes. When he came back outside, he heard it. The distant growl of an engine, the low rumble of tires against pavement. Josh's eyes snapped to the road. And there it was, a black SUV creeping past his house. The moment it reached his driveway, the engine roared to life. And before Josh could even move, it swerved hard off the road, straight into his hedge. Branches snapped like bones under the weight of the vehicle, the deep grinding crunch of metal tearing through it filling the night air. The SUV didn't just clip it, it demolished it. And just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. The taillights vanished into the darkness. Josh stood frozen for a moment, his fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. That was it. No more waiting. No more playing nice. Karen had just made a huge mistake, and she was about to find out exactly what happens when you push the wrong man too far. Josh didn't sleep that night. He sat in his garage, hands gripping his coffee mug, staring at the piece of shattered plastic he had picked up from the wreckage. His Hedge was gone, again, but this time he had something they didn't know he had. Evidence, proof that it wasn't just some random act of vandalism. The SUV had left behind more than broken branches and deep tire marks. It had left a trail. He turned the plastic over in his hands, inspecting the edges. Custom casing. Reinforced material. This wasn't just any vehicle. It was a high-end SUV, the kind that someone with money and power would drive. And there was only one person in the neighborhood who fit that description. Karen Douglas. Josh had been patient. He had played defense. He had tried to catch them in the act, tried to reason, tried to find a way around this war they had dragged him into. But they weren't playing fair. They had waited until his back was turned. They had been deliberate. Now it was his turn. By morning, Josh had a plan. He spent the day reinforcing his property, but not in a way anyone could see. He didn't want them to know he was setting a trap. The wreckage of his Hedge was still there, a reminder of how far they were willing to go, but he wasn't going to clean it up just yet. Let them think they had won. Let them think he was defeated. He dug into the soil, planting steel rods deep beneath the surface, securing the base of what remained of the Hedge with heavy stones and hidden reinforcements. On the surface, it looked like a mess, but beneath, it was a fortress. That night, he didn't sit on the porch. He didn't watch from the windows. He didn't wait up with a flashlight, like some paranoid homeowner hoping to catch a teenager playing pranks. No, he went to bed, because when they came back, and they were going to learn a very expensive lesson. Sometime after midnight, they took the bait. Josh woke up to the unmistakable sound of metal screeching against something unmovable. A hard, sharp crunch followed by a dull thud. For a second, everything was silent. Then, an engine sputtered, a door slammed, and muffled cursing cut through the quiet night. Josh took his time getting to the door. No need to rush. They weren't going anywhere. The moment he stepped onto his porch, he saw the black SUV sitting half buried in his Hedge. Well, what was left of it? The front end had folded inward. The hood crumpled like tin foil. One of the front tires had burst, and deep gouges in the paint showed exactly where the reinforced rods had done their job. And standing beside the wreck, clutching his wrist and seething with rage, was Karen's husband, Richard. Josh crossed his arms, tilting his head slightly. Having some trouble there? Richard whipped around, his face pale with fury. What the hell did you do? Josh took a slow step forward, letting the silence stretch between them. Looks like you hit something, Richard. He motioned toward the wrecked Hedge. Maybe you should be more careful where you drive. Richard's jaw clenched, his breathing heavy. He was trying to figure out how to turn this around, how to make it look like Josh was the problem, but he had nothing, because he knew he was caught. Josh glanced at the SUV again. The damage was extensive, far worse than just a busted headlight this time. Karen's little war had just cost them thousands, and Josh wasn't even close to done. The next day, he made a few calls. He had friends, people who worked in repair shops, people who knew how to find things out. And just as he expected, a black reinforced SUV had been brought in for repairs that morning. By Karen Douglas. Josh smiled. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. But what caught his attention wasn't the damage report. It was what the shop owner had casually mentioned during the call. Karen wasn't just some HOA busybody. She had connections. Developers, real estate moguls, city officials. People who had been pushing new projects through zoning approvals before homeowners even knew what was happening. And Josh's property? It was right in the middle of something big. This wasn't just about a Hedge. They wanted him gone. And if they were willing to go this far over a row of bushes, what would they do if he didn't back down? Josh set the phone down, his mind already racing through his next move. He had caught them in one act of destruction. That was just the start. Now, he needed to pull the whole thing apart. because Karen and her people had been playing games, and Josh was about to flip the entire board. Josh didn't waste time. He knew Karen and her people wouldn't take the loss lightly. They had already spent weeks trying to break him down, trying to push him out. The moment they realized he wasn't budging, they would escalate. He just didn't know how far they were willing to go. The answer came the next evening. He had been out late, working in his garage, when he heard it. A sharp, deliberate knock at the front door. Not the kind of knock you hear from a friendly neighbor. This was slow, heavy, a warning. Josh wiped the grease off his hands and walked to the door. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he flicked on the porch light and checked the peephole. A man in a suit. Not Karen. Not Richard. Not one of the HOA's usual enforcers. This was someone else. Someone who didn't belong here. Josh opened the door just enough to lean against the frame. "Can I help you?" The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a banker gives right before he tells you your house is being foreclosed. "Mr. Mackenzie," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "I'm here to offer you a way out of your current situation." Josh didn't blink. "I didn't know I needed one." The man chuckled, like he had heard this before. "We both know you've made things difficult for yourself. There's no reason for this to get worse." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper and held it out. "This is a revised buyout offer. 3 times the market value of your home. No strings attached." Josh didn't take it. "And if I say no?" The man's smile didn't fade, but the warmth drained from his eyes. "Then things get unpredictable." Josh exhaled slowly, keeping his expression neutral. "That a threat?" "A prediction," the man corrected. "One that I strongly suggest you consider." Josh finally took the paper, glanced at it, then crumpled it in his fist and tossed it onto the porch. "Not interested." For the first time, the man's polite mask slipped. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. But just as quickly, he composed himself. "That's disappointing," he said, stepping back. "You should sleep on it." Then he turned and walked away. Josh stood there, watching as the man got into a sleek black sedan and drove off. He didn't need to read the contract to know what it meant. They were done playing games. That night, he reinforced every lock on his house. He checked the security cameras, backed up the footage, and made sure every motion sensor was working. He wasn't paranoid, he was prepared. Because if these people thought they could scare him into selling, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The first hit came 2 days later. It started small. A letter from the city, citing him for unauthorized landscaping and demanding he remove his hedge or face fines. A completely fabricated complaint from the HOA, accusing him of violating community guidelines. Someone had even slashed one of his tires overnight. Petty, annoying, but not surprising. Then they stepped it up. Josh came home one afternoon to find his garage broken into. His tools were scattered. His workbench had been flipped over. And right in the middle of the mess, a brick, with a note tied around it. "Last chance." Josh's blood ran cold. This wasn't a warning anymore. This was a promise. He wasn't just some guy who fixed cars. He knew how things worked. He had spent enough time around mechanics, construction workers, and business owners to know when a deal was being forced. And he knew what came next if he didn't fold. He also knew something they didn't. He had been recording everything. Every interaction. Every phone call. Every security alert. He had backed up footage of the black SUV plowing through his hedge. He had files on every crooked permit request tied to Karen and her contacts. He even had a name. The suited man had been careful not to introduce himself, but Josh had run a license plate check on that black sedan. The name on the registration? Paul Langford, a developer, one with a history of shady deals and disappeared records. The kind of guy who didn't take no for an answer. Josh didn't go to the cops. They wouldn't do anything. Karen had too many people in her pocket. Langford had bigger people in his. Instead, he went straight to the press. He spent the next few hours uploading everything. Copies of forged documents, financial transactions tied to Langford's companies, aerial footage of illegal construction projects they had already started, on land they didn't even own yet. And then he sent an anonymous tip to every major news outlet in the state. He knew the second the story hit. His phone started buzzing. Emails flooded in. Reporters asking for interviews. The city council suddenly wanted to review some of the recent permits that had been approved. Then, right on cue, Karen showed up at his house. Josh didn't answer the door at first. He just watched from the window as she stood on his porch, arms crossed, her phone in hand. She was furious. After a minute, she pounded on the door. "Open up, Josh." He took his time. When he finally pulled the door open, she was seething. "You have no idea what you've just done," she snapped. Josh smiled. "Pretty sure I do. You just made yourself a target," she hissed. "You think Langford's just going to let this slide? You think I'm going to let this slide?" Josh leaned against the doorframe. "See, that's the thing, Karen. I don't think you have a choice anymore." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You're going to regret this." Josh held up his phone and tapped the screen. A red light blinked. Recording. Karen's face paled. Josh smirked. "Smile, Karen. You're on record." She backed away, her expression a mix of panic and rage. Without another word, she turned and stormed off. Josh closed the door and locked it, exhaling slowly. He had just blown the whole thing open, and he knew, without a doubt, the real fight was just getting started. Josh barely slept that night. He knew he had set something in motion that couldn't be undone. The news had spread faster than he expected. Reports about shady land deals, forged permits, and illegal construction projects tied to Langford were everywhere. The HOA wasn't just under scrutiny, it was under siege. Karen had made a mistake showing up at his house, threatening him while he was recording everything. The moment he uploaded that clip, people started asking questions. Questions the HOA didn't want to answer. By morning, the fallout had begun. The first sign was the frantic knocking on his door. Not a single knock, but a rapid, desperate pounding. Josh already knew who it was before he even opened the door. Karen stood there, hair disheveled, eyes wide with panic. She didn't even wait for him to speak before pushing inside, slamming the door behind her. "You have to take that video down," she blurted. Josh just stared at her. "Good morning to you two." She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but she was failing miserably. "Josh, listen. You don't understand what you've done. Langford, he's not like us. You think this is about HOA fines and property disputes? You've dragged the wrong people into the light." Josh folded his arms. "So you're finally admitting it. This was never about my hedge, was it?" Karen looked away, her jaw tightening. The hedge was just an excuse. Langford needed the land. We were supposed to make things difficult for you, pressure you until you gave up. Josh felt a cold anger settle in his gut. He had known it, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. He shook his head. "And you were okay with that?" She laughed bitterly. "You think I had a choice? Do you have any idea what happens when you say no to Langford?" Josh didn't answer. Karen ran a hand through her hair, exhaling shakily. "Josh, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you want me to go down for this. But I'm telling you, if you don't leave this alone, Langford is going to come after you." Josh studied her for a long moment. "He already has." Her eyes widened. "What?" Josh nodded toward the corner of his living room. A small red light blinked on his security system. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the footage. "Last night," he said, turning the screen toward her. Karen's face paled. The footage showed a black SUV idling outside his house. No headlights, no movement. Just watching, waiting. "They were here for almost an hour," Josh said. "Just sitting there. And then they left." Karen swallowed hard. "That's not a warning. That's a message." Josh's jaw clenched. He had expected retaliation, But this was different. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. Langford wasn't waiting for the media storm to die down. He was making his next move. Josh had already made his decision. He wasn't backing down. But he wasn't going to wait for Langford to act either. He grabbed his keys. "Where are you going?" Karen asked. Josh opened the door. To finish this, she hesitated, then followed. Josh drove straight to City Hall. By now, the news had shaken up enough people that some of Langford's supporters were jumping ship. They wanted distance, and Josh was about to force the rest of them to do the same. He walked in with Karen trailing behind him, straight to the city clerk's office. The receptionist barely looked up. "I need to file a motion for an emergency hearing," Josh said, dropping a thick stack of printed documents onto the counter. The receptionist frowned. "On what grounds?" Josh tapped the top page. "Fraud, illegal land seizure, HOA corruption." The woman blinked. "You have evidence?" Josh smiled. "Plenty." Within an hour, Langford's whole operation started unraveling. City officials scrambled to distance themselves. HOA board members resigned overnight. Investigators started pulling permits, bank transactions, and project approvals. Langford wasn't just exposed. He was cornered. By the next evening, Josh got the call. Langford had been arrested, not just for the land fraud, not just for the fake permits, but for bribing city officials, falsifying documents, and orchestrating harassment against homeowners. Karen sat across from Josh at his kitchen table, staring at the news on her phone. "I can't believe it," she whispered. Josh leaned back. "Believe it?" She shook her head. I thought he was untouchable." Josh exhaled. "They always think that, until they get caught." The next day, the HOA dissolved. The fines, the fabricated complaints, all of it vanished. Josh stepped outside, looking at his yard. The hedge was gone, but for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like he had lost. He would rebuild it. He would plant something new, and this time, he wouldn't be the only one watching over it. Karen walked up beside him. "You really won." Josh smirked. "I never had a choice." She glanced at him, then at the empty space where his hedge used to be. "I guess you're staying." Josh nodded. "Damn right I am." And with that, he turned back toward his house, finally free of the war that had been forced on him. Langford was gone. The HOA was gone. And Josh's home was finally his again,